This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
The best college football weekend of the year is here. It is the conference championship weekend, and there is a lot still left to be decided before the playoff committee fills out their brackets for this year. We're going to break down those conference championships by talking to Dr. Ed Feng, getting his read on those games based on what his numbers are saying, and let you know where he sees value over at FanDuel Sportsbook. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sanas. I am the managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research, joined here as I am every Wednesday by Dr. Ed Feng. You can find his work at thepowerrank.com and check him out on Twitter at thepowerrank. Ed, it is going to be a fantastic weekend for games. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm really looking forward to this set of games. I think Alabama, Georgia should be really awesome and answer some questions maybe about both of those teams. And we got Friday night, little appetizer in the soon-to-be defunct conference out there. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
But what a way for the Pac-12 to go out. You know, they've had a fun year all year, honestly, given they've had competitive teams. And now you get an undefeated team that is a 9.5-point dog on a Friday night to open up the championship weekend. They're going out with a bang. That is for sure.
Or it could end in a complete whimper if the game goes the way I think it might.
That's true. That is true as well. Before we dive in, though, I did want to talk to you about the game because, Ed, we hype up a lot of games in college football, and they get this hype, and a lot of times, like in the national semifinals, they may not come through. But that game fully lived up to the hype. So honestly, just want to ask you about the experience of watching that game because I had a blast watching Ohio State, Michigan. Thoughts for you from what you saw there on Saturday?
It was an incredible game. These are clearly two of the top teams in the nation. And, Michigan had a slight edge in success rate, and Ohio State had a slight edge in total yards. And the game really came down to those two turnovers by Ohio State. Just an incredible game. Feel fortunate to be on the Michigan side and get the W. But it's also incredible to think about Ryan Day's career at Ohio State. He's got 3 losses to Michigan, which everyone will consistently remind him to. He's got 2 losses to Clemson in the college football playoff, 1 to Alabama in the college football playoff, and then a random regular season loss to Oregon. I might be forgetting one.
Yeah.
But that's it.
Yeah. No
random road loss to a Big Ten West team. That would be hard this year, but yeah. So, the man has done a remarkable job there. He's had some really good teams. He continues to have some really good football teams. He lost probably the best quarterback prospect. CJ Stroud. We see what he does every Sunday, right? We lost him and he still has one of the best football teams in the nation.
I guess for me, my confusion there is watching that game. Michigan is clearly a top 2 team in the country right now. Ohio State played very well in that game on the road. Yep. I guess I'm confused about why they fell below Texas. If you're looking at 1-loss teams, to me, that kind of feels like recency bias just because Ohio State lost more recently. They fell behind Texas. So I guess that was my one frustration, with the committee. I know there's been a lot of talk about Florida State given the injury to the quarterback, but
right.
I feel like Ohio State's the better team. So I guess I'm a bit frustrated they fell behind Texas just because they lost more recently, it seemed like.
Yeah, we'll see how it all plays out, right? Those college football playoff rankings are all about politics and whatever the committee decides, right? It's really supposed to be the best 4 teams. We all know it's not the best 4 teams. It's some combination of best and deserving.
Yeah.
I'm more frustrated that they really think that this undefeated Florida State team without its quarterback is better than Oregon.
Yeah.
That's a joke.
Yeah.
That's just laughable. So
yeah.
I don't know. I wish the language would be a little bit better there. You can pick at it all day. There'll be some interesting things. So we'll see how it all shakes out. We got one more
And the
week of
committee's
football.
choices make it a lot easier this weekend because Florida State does play Louisville, a spread that has tightened 3 points since open. So we'll talk about that game and talk about Pac-12 championship and much more. And of course, the SEC championship to get you ready for this weekend here in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. Later on today, Tom Vecchio will break down Thursday night football. We got the Seahawks taking on the Cowboys. Tom will break that down from a prop betting perspective here on the Covering the Spread podcast feed, and over on FanDuel TV Plus, we'll have our Week 12, Week 13 NFL preview coming up tomorrow here on the same feed with Ed back for that as well. All right here on the Covering the Spread podcast feed. So subscribe to that. If you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and check us out on FanDuel TV Plus as well. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There is a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, totals, and more. So visit FanDuel and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. First online real money wager only. $5 pregame moneyline wager required. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Arizona. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In Connecticut, 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat. 1-800-9-WIN in Indiana. 1-800-522-4700. Visit ksgamblinghealth.com in Kansas. 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghealth.org in Maryland. 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia. 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Let's kick things off by talking about that Friday night game between Oregon and Washington, where right now Oregon is a 9.5-point favorite at FanDuel Sportsbook. Total here is 65.5. Ned, you've talked a lot about this game throughout the year, about how your numbers favor Oregon on a neutral field, and we see the market agrees with you there. But this spread is pretty lofty. So is there still value on Oregon, or have things moved enough where Washington is kind of interesting to you?
I still think there's a little bit of value in Oregon while it's in single digits. I know that's crazy, right? Like Washington was a 3-point favorite at home not too long ago, but these teams are just completely headed in the opposite directions. I feel like I said this last week. And Washington continues to be headed in the wrong direction, right? They closed as a 15-point favorite by some of my numbers against Washington State. I thought that was too much. They won by 3. None of it looked easy for this team. They still get it done. Oh, and then Michael Penix had that crazy thing happen at the end of I don't even know what was happening. He was like sticking his head in like a shelf somewhere. Couldn't watch. Anyway, Oregon's just been utterly dominant, right? I mean, they just ever since the Washington game, they have just destroyed everyone in their way. Bo Nix has plenty of motivation. If going to college football playoff isn't enough, I think a good game pretty much locks up the Heisman for him. He has been incredible. I actually have this as Oregon by 12. I'm pretty sure I said last week I would make it like 10, 9.5. It's 12. I would bet it at minus 9.5. FanDuel was nice enough to give me an early Christmas present. They had this at 7.5 on at some point on Saturday. And actually with some like reasonable limits too.
Yeah.
And I still think there's value here. I think this one potentially could get ugly. I mean, I think Washington really needs to come out and play the best game, play a lot better than they have since they last met Oregon. Oregon needs to maybe turn the ball over. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is the last Pac-12 game. Is it going to be interesting in the second half? I kind of hope so, but maybe I don't hope so. Maybe Oregon just kind of beats them, and they should pretty easily cruise into the playoff with a win here.
So you said you had it at 7.5 on Saturdays where you got it at. It's now 9.5. The 9.5 on Oregon is -112 right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. It sounds like based on what you're saying, you think it's pretty likely this game gets double digits before Friday. Did I interpret that correctly?
I don't know. I think maybe. I
Yeah.
wouldn't be surprised if it got to 10. I think
Yeah.
10 is a reasonable number and a number that would make me not want to bet it too much, but I might still. 9.5, yeah. I mean, go for it.
Okay, so Oregon -9.5, -112 for Ed is a bet he likes for that Friday game in the Pac-12. Let's talk now about the SEC. Very fun game here as well. We have Georgia taking on Alabama, and right now Georgia is a 6.5-point favorite, up from 5.5 earlier on this week. Total is up to 55.5 here, up a point from where it was earlier on as well. And Alabama did need a miracle to remain a one-loss team, but hey, they got the job done. They were playing well before that game against Auburn as well. So can they keep this game close enough to cover against a Georgia team that outside of last week has kind of been steamrolling people recently?
Right. So first, let's go back to that Auburn game. I watched the second half of the game. It's an incredible game. Everyone's probably seen what happened with the 4th and 31, 4th and goal from the 31-yard line, and they convert it. But let's step back a little bit. This is the most interesting box score I've ever seen. Alabama dominated in terms of yards, over 100 more than Auburn. They dominated in terms of success rate, almost 10% better than Auburn. Alabama was +3 in turnovers, and they were 2 for 2 in 4th downs. So we basically, when I look at a box score, this is exactly how I go down things. Like, right. I look at success rate first, but I try to look at total yards to see general sense for how the game went. And then usually when you see something like that and it turns out, in a game that Alabama really should have lost, right? Then you're like, oh, well, they got killed in the turnover department. No. And then when you go past that, you look at like 4th down. And, what really happened was Auburn had some like big plays that ended up in touchdowns. There's a couple of big runs that set up touchdowns, and then there's a 27-yard touchdown pass. So just really kind of one of the strangest box scores I can actually remember looking at in a really long time. It's a box score that actually reflects pretty well for Alabama heading into this game. And then we got to look at Georgia. Georgia Tech was actually in that game for a while. And one thing that really stands out to me is that Georgia Tech had a 57.1% rushing success rate against Georgia's defense. Kirby Smart probably losing some sleep over that. It's probably can't even imagine how he is taking that. We've talked about how Georgia's defense really isn't the same that it was last year. It's really been a downgrade. A lot of the talk about the defensive line, but they might not be able to stop the running game against some really good teams later. So, anyway, I think I would lean towards Alabama at +6.5. I'm making this about 3.7 is the number that I have. Kind of told you why, still high on Alabama because of the underlying numbers. Georgia, obviously they've been great lately, but not the best performance against Georgia Tech. And look, when you look at the money line at FanDuel, it's about 2 and 3 that Georgia wins. If Georgia wins, they're clearly in the playoff. It's when you look at the odds for them to make the playoff, it's 81%. So they're essentially kind of saying if they lose, that it's about a coin flip whether they'll stay in that top 4, which is pretty interesting. I think a lot of people will argue it many different ways, but that's what the markets say right now. I really haven't been following kind of how the playoff things have been working. I just kind of, stick to it by a game basis and let the markets kind of tell me what happens. But I think that's an interesting element of this game. If Georgia loses, do they still make it? And it seems like a coin flip.
Yeah, it's interesting too.
It depends on everything else that happens as well, right?
Right. And I feel like a coin flip feels almost like underselling it because I think they should be pretty safe. I think Michigan might be safe too, but I don't know, maybe not to Iowa, but I think those two teams might be kind of locked in at this point with the way things have gone. But
I don't know. I think Michigan has. Just with all the publicity and the sign stealing stuff. I don't
that's
think,
true. Yeah.
I don't think anyone's going to do them any favors, and that's the way they should think about it. I don't know. I mean, I think with Georgia, it's really interesting. I mean, and Alabama could very well win this game, which would make it way more interesting than it has been in past years.
Certainly. Now, you've talked before recently about how your numbers have shown value in betting against Georgia, but you have not done so because you respect this Georgia team, think they've been on the ascent. Does the game last week against Georgia Tech allow you to feel more okay about showing value on the Alabama side? I know you said it was more of a lean for you than an actual bet. So it's not like you're saying I have confidence in Alabama, but do you feel better about that given what we saw last week?
I wouldn't say it's a performance against Georgia Tech. I would say more that it's Alabama, and Alabama is a program that is, I don't think they're as good as Georgia, but they belong in the same class. It's not like the Kentuckys and the whatever we were talking about, even the Mississippis of the world that I just don't believe are in the same class as Georgia. I think Alabama, you can make the case that they are in the same class, and that they could certainly pull off the upset here. We'll see how it goes.
All right. So a lean towards Alabama plus 6.5, which is minus 115 right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. Let's talk here about Louisville at Florida or against Florida State, where right now it is Florida State minus 2.5 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Total in this game is 47.5, and Tate Rodemaker didn't do a whole lot last week for Florida State to win, left briefly to be checked for a head injury and then came right back in, which was kind of weird, but now facing a Louisville team that you've been down on all year. And so Ed, backup quarterback for Florida State, but they're facing a Louisville team that you've not been super high on. So what's your read on this game right now?
Yeah, I actually would push back a little bit on the fact that he went into the injury tent. Like the way that he got hit and the way that his head hit the ground, I thought he was dead. Yeah. I mean, it was pretty vicious. I'm kind of surprised he even came back out, and I thought we would be talking about a third string quarterback today. Rodemaker is going to play 32% success rate. Passing success rate in that game, it was probably, I didn't break it down into halves, but it sounded like it was bad in the beginning and maybe got a little bit better. Actually, I mean, let's just back up a step. I don't realize Jordan Travis got hurt against Northern Alabama. Like of all the bad breaks that a program can get, you're playing a cupcake the week before, like week 12 or whatever, and your Heisman caliber quarterback gets hurt. And it's like, it seems like he had surgery, but I was also looking up, like, they don't even know exactly what happened to his leg or whatever. Just, it's kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
So, and then the other part about this game, Louisville, they lost to Kentucky last week. Kind of, if they ever had a chance to make the playoff, it was over. But they were actually better than Kentucky in terms of yards and success rate, -2 in turnovers. They lose the game. And, like Florida State just doesn't look particularly good against Florida. With my model, I'm making Florida State a winner by about 3 points, 3.3 points. I think there needs to be a pretty sizable adjustment for the quarterback position. I think this should be closer to a pick, honestly. I wouldn't be surprised if Louisville wins this game. I think there's a lot of programs that would be obviously very happy if Florida State lost this game. I think the college football playoff would be pretty happy if Tate Rodemaker was not a starting quarterback in one of those semifinal games. I can certainly see that happening.
Yeah, and that's saying a lot given that you've talked several times this year about not liking Louisville. The fact that you're in line with the market because the -2.5 is -122, which implies it's around 3.3 points, in that vicinity for sure. So like you are aligned with the market before you account for the fact that it is a backup quarterback for Florida State. So the +2.5 in Louisville is even money. Their money line is +116. It's not a huge gap there, but it does sound like despite the fact you've been down on Louisville all year, you can make an exception given the setup of this game specifically.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think Florida State's right for an upset. I mean, I will, their defense is elite. They're third in my adjusted success rate. They are physical. They are athletic. They're going to be the best unit on the field. But I think it's fair to have a lot of questions about what this team can do on offense with the backup quarterback.
Well, speaking of elite defense, let's talk about the Big Ten championship game. We got Iowa taking on Michigan, where right now spread is Michigan -22.5. Total in this game is 34.5. This is a phenomenal game, Ed. Like, it's just fantastic to gaze at this market right now. Iowa's offense has been abysmal all year long, so I'm not going to ask you about that against this Michigan defense. Like, not even going to ask. But can the defense do enough to cover a large spread in this one?
We'll see. Iowa is a program that has had a great defense, and they do have, and that's been a tradition there. When you look at their success rate, they actually have the 8th best in FBS, so that's obviously good. But then you got to remember their schedule. They're playing all these offenses in the Big Ten West that suck. And when I do my schedule adjustments, they actually get dropped to 20th. So clearly Iowa's still a very good defense, but you could argue that they're not in the same class as Penn State and Ohio State, which are, Penn State's first in my adjusted success rate, Ohio State's 8th. I think their defense played really well against Michigan last week. I can't say I can't really say anything good about Iowa in this game. Like my member numbers actually have this closer to like 18, and I warned everyone, please do not bet this game because my member numbers have Iowa. When I actually look at the season-long averages, Michigan is about a 23-point favorite. Iowa, so that's basically the data from the current season. And Iowa is actually very close to FBS average by those metrics. Obviously, the offense is dropping it down, and when you're 130th out of 133 teams, that's bad. That's really bad. The second worst Power 5 team is actually Nebraska, a team that they obviously played, which is making Iowa's defense look better. So yeah, actually, let's talk about Iowa's offense. I don't know if FanDuel has this market, but yesterday the DraftKings market for Iowa points in the first half was 0.5 point.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually shaded towards the under for a while. Do you guys have that market?
They have the Iowa team total for the game was 6.5.
Right, which is that's basically what the market is saying. They expect Iowa to kick 2 field goals, right?
Right.
And now the question is, and obviously that's more likely in the second half, but like the first half Iowa total was 0.5 point.
Yeah.
Essentially even money.
The second half was too.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I think is one of the funnier things I've ever seen.
Yeah.
In a betting market. I'm debating. I don't know what it's at right now, but I didn't actually do it yesterday, but
yeah,
with no math or no potential edge, I thought it would be fun to just bet Iowa under 0.5 point for the first half for my rooting interests. I think that would be a fun thing to root for. But I've heard a lot of other people suggest that Iowa has no chance in this game. I find it hard to suggest that they have a chance in this game.
Yeah. The team total for the full game for Iowa at FanDuel Sportsbook, total is 6.5 for them. The over is -128, but Ed, I will say that's gotten some action because it was -115 yesterday on the over. So there are some Iowa backers out there somewhere.
Yeah.
They lurk.
I think the game total is interesting, right? Because you could imagine like a meaningless touchdown late that pushes that over when like the third stringers for Michigan are in there, right?
Yeah.
That's why the first half total is really interesting.
Right. And I think the under there was even money, I believe, if I remember that correctly, under 0.5 point was even money. But it also I think that's a great, if you're trying to talk to a new bettor about how these things are medians versus averages, you just show them that market because their implied total for the game is obviously above 0 or it's above, or above 2 or whatever it may be. But because the odds that they score points in that first half might be around 50%. It's a good illustration of that. So yes, it's a funny market and yes, it's potentially very accurate, but it's also a good illustration of you're betting medians, not averages when it comes to these things. I think is a great thing. There's for new bettors to conceptualize pretty easily with one market.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know if I necessarily think it in terms of medians and averages here. It's just, do they score or not? That's when you set it at a half
point.
Right. I mean, it's just like picks too. They usually set it at a half. So it's no pick or a pick, at least one pick. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. It should. I don't think this is going to be an interesting game, but who knows? Maybe Iowa will surprise us all.
Yeah, I feel bad for Brian Ferentz. People have kicked him all year for 2 years now, and it was cool to see him get all the hugs on the sidelines after the Nebraska game and stuff like that. So good for him. I don't want to kick him while he's down, but my goodness, is that a way to go out having the implied total, the 0.5 point or the team total of 0.5 point for both the first and the second half.
That's Michigan,
amazing.
And Michigan's answered a lot of questions on defense. Like, this unit is better than they were last year, and they're a big reason they won last week.
Absolutely. Anything else stand out to you across this conference championship slate, Ed?
Yeah, I actually did want to talk about a prop. I like Ollie Gordon, the Oklahoma State running back, under 103.5 yards on DK. It's 99.5 at FanDuel. I would bet that too. I actually spent some time for the last part of the season basically looking at rushing totals that were trying to go under rushing totals that were in the hundreds. And Ollie Gordon is, he's only he's gone over this mark in 8 of the last 9 games, which makes you wonder, well, why would you bet the under? Well, first, Texas' run defense is really good. And second, the game script is probably going to be against Oklahoma State in the second half. Texas is about 12-point favorite, 12.5-point favorite. I think Texas is in a class above Oklahoma State. I do think they're going to be up late in this game. And I think Ollie Gordon could clearly, if he gets the ball 30 times, he's going to go over, right? Even if he doesn't break any long runs. But I don't think he's going to get the carries because of the negative game script in the second half. I like the under on his rushing total, as good as he is.
Yeah, 14.5 is now the number for Texas Oklahoma State, which I think just bolsters your argument for taking the under on the rushing prop.
Right.
Yeah, so that number is 99.5 FanDuel Sportsbook. But as always, shop around, get the best number that you can. Use responsible gaming, and that from that perspective, the spread there again, 14.5 for Texas versus Oklahoma State. Really fun game there as well, which should be a very fun weekend across all of college football. That is all that we have here for today on Covering the Spread. Ed will be back with us once again tomorrow talking about NFL week number 13. But Ed, until then, what is going on for you over at the Power Rank?
I had Ben Brown, my podcast. We talked both college football and NFL and a lot of other interesting modeling ideas. So check that out wherever you get your podcasts my podcast is the Football Analytics Show. And then, check out my free newsletter. If you're looking for smarter betting action any given weekend, 5 Nugget Saturday is the free service for you. You can check that out. It's my curated list of tips and analytics and bets. So check that out at thepowerrank.com.
Big fan of Ben Brown, so I'll check that out over at the Football Analytics Show for that. And Ed's numbers are available at thepowerrank.com. Ed is on Twitter at thepowerrank. I am on Twitter at Jim Saunas. You can find me on Threads as well at jim.saunas. You can find FanDuel Research on Twitter at FanDuel Research. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your bets for tonight. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow to break down NFL Week 13. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.